have Dr. Karen Wolffe. She manages a private practice as a career counselor and consultant in Austin, Texas. She is the author of Career Counseling for People with Disabilities, a practical guide to finding employment. She has published multiple journals based on her work with blind and low vision individuals, both in rehabilitation and education settings. Her research and writing focuses include the importance of career education, social skills development, transition issues, employment opportunities for people with disabilities, and literacy in the workplace. So I'm going to let Dr. Wolffe take it from here and let you learn what she knows. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So my PowerPoint is entitled Skills for Success. This is my approach to preparing young people across the age range, frankly, for the transition from school into adult life. And on this first slide, I've given you the proper spelling of my name, which is important in case you would like to reach out to me. And I've also given you my email address. So it's Karen Wolffe, KarenWolffe @gmail.com. I'm happy to hear from any of you with questions or comments at your convenience. So I'll go to the next slide, please. The very first and most important of all the things that you can do, frankly, from my perspective as a parent, in addition to simply loving your child unconditionally, is to convey always your high expectations of your child, and to ask the other people in your life and his or her life to do so as well. So think grandparents, siblings, and any significant others. That might be friends and neighbors, it might be extended family members, people from your community, whether it's religious figures, priests, rabbis, whomever, community members, to always convey high expectations of your child. The next slide, please. So what kinds of things specifically can you do as parents? I think it's very important that you tell your child what you expect of him or her in terms of the behaviors you want to see them perform. The exact behaviors. If you want the child to come to you to say first the name of the child and then please come to me, or I need you to sit to the dining room table, I need you to go to your room, not to say would you like to or if you'd like, but to say what it is you expect exactly in terms of the behavior you want. Johnny, I need you to sit down at the table immediately. Short, sweet, specific. And to keep your rules in the household always simple and the consequences real. I don't encourage you to have a lot of rules. I encourage you to have very few rules, but to think about them carefully and to think about what are non-negotiables from your perspective and what the consequences are going to be if your child misbehaves. And you must be prepared to follow through on those consequences. So if the rule is no hitting, no biting, that should be the rule, period, end of story. And if the consequences are first time you break the rule, you go to your room. Second time you break the rule, you go to your room and you lose privileges like watching television or listening to music for 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever the case may be. You need to state what the rule is and what the consequences are, and then follow through. If you have a rule, no asking for treats at the store, no whining at the store, no badgering your mother at the store for things we don't need. If you do it, we leave. If that's the rule and the consequence, if the child misbehaves, you must leave the store. So simple rules and real consequences. And then my last bullet point on this slide is to help you understand that you, as the adult, as the parent, need to explain to your child how he or she can contribute at home, at school, and in the community. We need to let our children know what they can do to help out. By picking up your clothes, you help me, you help the other people in the family. By putting your toys away in this particular spot, you help everyone in the family keep from tripping. You need to be specific about what they can do, how they can help, and let them know that those are real contributions. I need you to turn in your homework at school. I need you to treat your teacher respectfully, because that's how we let other people know that we care about them. In the community, I expect you to be pleasant when people speak to you. If they say hello, that you say hello. If you don't know who they are, all you have to say is hello and move on. But explain how they need to behave and what they are contributing both at home, in the school, and in the community. Next. Here are some very specific examples. By doing their chores, your children contribute to the family, helping with the dishes, helping set the table, helping with laundry, helping to pick up toys. Start with simple things. If you're interested in having your child help with the laundry, the first thing might be to teach them how to sort the clothes into darks and lights if they have the vision to see that difference. If they don't, to have them help you load the washing machine, for example. You've done the sorting, you've got the clothes or the towels, the sheets, whatever, ready to go into the washing machine. You have the child help you load the washing machine, help you unload the dryer, help you fold. Start with simple things. Have them fold the washcloths or the hand towels or the dishcloths, and then move up to bath towels, move up to folding pillowcases, then folding flat sheets, then folding fitted sheets. Keep adding to the chores as the child masters a level of expertise with one particular component of the task. Expect your children to complete their homework. You're helping, as teachers, we're helping those parents to keep them informed about school events or field trips. As parents, you need to respond to the teachers when they tell you about these kinds of events to indicate whether your child will attend, whether you will attend, what finding out if you don't know what they need to bring with them, that sort of thing. It's important to give your child opportunities to run errands. Could you take these dishes to the sink, please? Or could you take this letter to our neighbor, it was misdelivered? Or can you please take this tool to your father who's out in the garage? Specific errands, specific tasks that let children know that they are valued and needed. And then my last example here under what they can do, so to speak, in terms of helping you out around the house is taking care of pets or younger children in the family. And then I think they have opportunities as well, and hopefully you'll give them those opportunities to help out neighbors or other relatives with tasks like walking pets or babysitting or caring for plants when they are away. If you have your child do some of these things, It will be important initially for you to go with the child to make sure that he or she is doing what they need to do and doing it appropriately. I think about those plants and being watered. You want to make sure the water is staying on the plant and not going onto the neighbor's floor, that sort of thing. But those kinds of activities are great in terms of letting children know what those expectations are, setting the bar high, and setting the stage for them to learn by doing. Next slide, please. Teach your child the organizational skills that they will use at home and at school. I encourage you to teach them how to use those electronic options as well, computers and smartphones. And here I'm thinking specifically about setting up folders, setting up files, labeling those files. At home, I'm speaking specifically about things like having a space where you put your toys, segments of the closet, for example, where you hang or fold your shirts, your t-shirts, your slacks, where you hang your coat. Those skills that you use as a parent when you are organizing your kitchen, putting your silverware, if you will, into the drawer, into compartmentalized areas, all the knives together, all the spoons together, all the forks together, and to show those skills to your child, both for them to see how you're organizing and then for them to follow that same kind of behavior, I think is a really important part of how we reinforce our high expectations of our children by showing them those organizational skills that they need to learn and then asking them to use them. Encourage your child to make simple snacks and meals that can be fixed for himself or herself and other family members or friends. Most of us love to do some of these simple things like making cookies. In the early stages, we just have our kids help us with mixing the ingredients that we've measured out. We have them put the cookies on the tray, if you will, the cookie tray sheet. We might have them ice them or put sprinkles on the cookies. This is a perfect time of the year for that. The holidays are a wonderful time to include children in those tasks around the house. When they're getting ready to go to preschool or elementary school, have them work with you to make those snacks that they're going to take or meals that they're going to take. Bagging carrot sticks, for example, or putting the made sandwich into the little baggie or container that you use. If it's a little plastic Tupperware type container, or if it's a waxed sheet to fold the sandwich into. Any of those kinds of early steps are important. And then to move them to actually food preparation, where maybe they make their own sandwich. Do not start with peanut butter and jelly. Peanut butter is very hard to spread. If you make sandwiches, for example, a cheese sandwich or a meat sandwich, where you can have the child put the pieces of bread out on the counter, spread any condiment they may want, mayonnaise or mustard or ketchup, add the meat or add the cheese, anything that is manageable without having to be spread. You can, I think most kids do pretty well with spreading things like mayonnaise and mustard because they move easily across the bread versus that peanut butter, which has a tendency to clump. So think about what it is you're asking them to spread, what it is you're asking them to put into between those pieces of bread, but encourage them to participate in the activity. I know it's not always easy. I know sometimes you don't have time for it and that you need to just do it yourself. I'm okay with that. But periodically, even if you have an assigned time, like MWF, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that you have them help you, it's important that they learn how to do these things. And home is the natural environment for that to happen. Finally, I talk here about presenting well. And I think you are the best teachers for your children in terms of how to present well, how to groom themselves to meet your expectations and the expectations of the public, to brush their teeth, to wash their hair, to put their clothes on properly. And I encourage you to take as active a role as possible in this kind of instruction. We can do some of these things at school, but it's never the same as what you are able to do at home. And I think you know, and your children know that you know how you want them to look in terms of the hairstyle that they wear, the clothes that they wear. Make sure that you are staying age appropriate. Make sure that their costumes or what they are wearing match up with the other kids at school, similar kinds of, if they have a uniform, that their uniform is the same. If they don't have a uniform, what the informal uniform is that the other kids are wearing. Do they mostly wear dark pants or jeans and light shirts or whatever, to make sure that they are presenting well for the environment that they are in. Next slide, please. My second area, this first area, remember, was conveying those high expectations. The second area is encouraging socialization. This may be the most critical skill that some of your children will learn. It may be the one thing that enables them, once they get a job, to stay employed. It certainly is one of the most important skills that they will ever learn in terms of having a network of support beyond the family, because you will not always be there, and you need to encourage your children to socialize with other people. So my first rule of thumb is always to model what you want to see your child doing while engaged with others. And I caution you here because these days I see a lot of parents who spend more time on their phones than they do engaged with other people, including their children. Please think about what you are doing. Is that the kind of behavior that you want to encourage with your children? If not, put your phone away periodically and chat with your kids, chat with other people around you. Pay attention to the other people in your world with whom you can hopefully still interact face to face. Model what you want to see your child doing while engaged with others. That means using the social amenities. Please, thank you, you're welcome. Excuse me if you bump into someone or do something out of sorts, sneeze or cough in the vicinity of someone else. Model those behaviors so your children understand that you see those behaviors as important social behaviors for self and others. Next slide, please. So I've just been talking about what to do. I'll reinforce that by repeating myself. Always reinforce positive social behaviors when you see your child doing them. So if they are smiling or orienting toward you or others, give them kudos. If they are listening and you have evidence of them listening, they can repeat back what you've just said, or they ask you a pertinent question, reinforce that skill. I'm so proud of you. You listened so carefully and you are doing exactly what I asked you to do. Thank you very much. Children without good vision have a tendency to lose this smiling behavior because it's not necessarily reinforced visually the way it is for other kids. Reinforce your kids. Many of the children that we care about and live with who have vision impairment are not good about orienting toward others because they can't see them or can't see them well. Help your child understand that in our society, it is important that people trying to communicate with one another face each other and make eye contact if possible. If they can't make eye contact, They still need to orient toward the speaker. The rule I use is point your nose toward the voice you are trying to pay attention to. Orient your face toward that person speaking to you so that it looks to that person as if you are paying attention to them. You're the best people on the face of earth as parents to teach your kids how to share appropriately with others. What do you want them to tell other people? What do you want them to say to me as a stranger, or to their classroom teacher, or to the neighbors, or to their classmates about themselves, about you, about the family, about the neighbor? What do you want them to share? They need to talk about themselves. They need to talk about what's going on in their lives. That includes you and the rest of the family. But make sure that what they're saying is what you want them to be saying. They need to understand that sometimes things happen at home, if we have a quarrel with one another, that's meant to stay at home. It's not meant to be shared with other people. If someone does something in the family that is embarrassing or punishable, that's not something that you necessarily share with a stranger on the street. It's important, I think, that children understand that if you meet someone in the public and you need to find your way, it's appropriate to ask for instructions and directions from another person, a stranger. But you don't tell them your phone number. You might say, "Excuse me, could I get some help from you, please?" If the person says, "What's your name?" I might share my first name. I'm not going to share my whole name. And I'm certainly not going to share where I live or my phone number. And that's what kids need to learn. If someone asks you, "What's your name?" it's fine to say, "My name is Karen. What's your name?" But it's not okay to give away lots of personal information. And I think parents are in that unique role where they can be very specific with their child about what to share, when to share, and with whom to share. I'm going to encourage you to encourage your children to carry on conversations with other children, not just adults. Many of the students that I work with who are blind or have low vision can only carry on a conversation with an adult because that's who they're surrounded by. They're surrounded by teachers and therapists and parents and caring adults, and the other kids don't want to be with them. Many of the children have personal aides at school. I always share with parents and with kids, if you're using someone as a personal aide, make sure that you're only using them appropriately for assistance when you need it in the classroom, with getting your materials, not with socialization. When you are out to play at recess, when you are out on a field trip, when you are going to other classes, you need to be mixing and mingling with other kids. And if you see your child initiating a conversation with a peer, please reinforce that. Please share with them how pleased you are to see them chatting on the playground with the other kids. Or when you go to the local park, if they make an effort to reach out to other children, to reinforce that, because it's one of the most important skills that you can give your kids, how to initiate and carry on conversations, not just with adults, but with peers. So think about some of the things that you need to share with your kids. Well, what are you playing with? Questions that they can ask other kids. Who else is with you? Do you go to the same school as me? What school do you go to? Where do you go to school? What classes do you take? the kinds of questions that they can ask other kids. What do you do for fun? Did you see the movie? Did you see the latest movie? Did you see do you listen to music? Do you like music? Do you play sport? Are you in a band? Any of the kinds of questions that you think your child might be interested in finding out information about other people and being prepared to share information about self with peers. Next slide, please. Teach your kids social skills in these natural environments. I mentioned the park. I encourage you to enroll your children in creative dramatics classes or other kinds of community-based classes that they might enjoy. Art classes, karate classes, judo class, any kind of classes that you think they might have an opportunity to be with other people their age and engage. If you have the opportunity to visit with teachers and therapists, people in the school who are working with your child, encourage those folks to have your child involved in cooperative learning activities. In gym classes, in all of the academic classes that I'm aware of at school, certainly with older students, there are opportunities for cooperative learning. Make sure your child is included and make sure that your child has a meaningful role in those cooperative learning activities. I encourage you to support the involvement of your children in extracurricular groups. I know it's a lot of work. I know some of us spend more time chauffeuring kids around than we ever anticipated having to do. But please understand that your child with a vision impairment needs to do those same kinds of extracurricular activities as your children without disabilities. They need to be involved in sport, in leisure, in scouting, any kind of religious or secular youth groups that your other kids are involved in. Support their involvement in these extracurricular groups. School is not enough. It's not enough, particularly in terms of socialization. Many of the young people that I work with who are severely visually impaired or blind spend, I would share with you, most of their time outside of the family home at school. And many of them are isolated in the mainstream, meaning that they really do not have friends and activities that they're involved in at school that support social skill development. Be careful. Make sure that your children do not fall into that trap. They need to be involved in extracurricular groups. Next slide, please. Help your child identify his or her interests, abilities, values, and personality traits, both to match up with other people. This is the socialization piece, and to be prepared for the next environment in terms of work. Children gravitate towards other children with whom they have common interests. So if your child loves music, or your child loves football, or your child loves to swim, those are interests that they can share with others and think about what ramifications they might have for the future. Likewise, abilities. If your child is really good on technology, or really, really good at gardening, or really good at managing his or her money, those are abilities that will serve them well moving forward into adult life and work. Values are those things that you believe in and that your child believes in because you believe in them. The things that are important based on your belief system. So if you value family, if you value religion, if you value freedom or creativity or security or any of the other bazillion words we use to label our values, it's important to let your child know that those are values, those are the things we believe in. I always think health, wealth, and fortune, or health, wealth, and happiness. Those kinds of words are the words that often people will say, I just want my child to grow up to live happily ever after. That's a value. You value that, you believe in the importance of that. Help your child understand that's what you're talking about. And then those personality traits to match up with others. Think about the children in your life. Some of them are very social, some of them are shy, some of them are outgoing, some of them are very, very energetic, some of them are low-keyed, slower moving. Those are personality traits. Identify those for your children and help them understand that they probably are going to be happiest when they are matching up with other people who are like them. And then finally, I want to encourage you to help your child understand the effect of his or her behavior on other people, and then how to respond to the behaviors of other children and adults. So in the first instance here, understanding the effect of behavior on others, if you see your child ignore a child who speaks to them, follow up and say, how do you think that other child felt when you didn't respond to his greeting? How do you think that made him feel? So that he understands that it might have made that other child feel badly, or feel that he wasn't interested in him, or feel that he wasn't somehow acceptable. They need to understand that when we behave in certain ways, it affects other people. And that when other people behave in certain ways toward us, it affects how we feel, and then we need to respond and let those folks know. So if your child is engaged with someone and they just walk off, which happens sometimes, and then your child doesn't even realize it until the child is long gone, they may want to follow up and say, I was so disappointed because I thought you were still there and you had already walked away. They need to learn how to understand their behavior and how it affects others, and be prepared to respond to the behavior of other people in a way that is polite, but also lets that other person know that that was noticed. Next slide, please. Compensatory skills. We sometimes call them access skills. These are the skills that your child learns, alternative skills, because he or she is visually impaired. People with good vision don't need these skills, but people who are visually impaired use these compensatory skills or alternative skills to access the sighted world. Think Braille, think optical devices, think abacus, think some of the assistive technology that enables your child to use tools like their smartphone or their computer without sight, where most of society is relying on sight. Next slide, please. What I encourage you to do as a parent is to learn these alternative skills yourself. If you don't already know Braille, I encourage you to learn at least enough Braille to be able to communicate informally, write in notes or cards in Braille for your child. Learn and understand how to use assistive technology, not just how to turn it on and off, but how to use it, where the cheat sheets are for commands for tools like JAWS. Learn and use those alternative techniques yourself. Mark things in your home so that they are easy, with tactile markings, so that they are easily used by your child, and you make it clear to your child that you are using that same tool with those same markings. Always think about things like microwaves, where you can easily put lock dots on the 5, for example, or on the start and stop buttons, the number 1 and the 0, whatever it is that you use in terms of your system, but to mark those tools so that your child sees them and so that you see them and other people see them in the environment. And encouraging your child to demonstrate those disability-specific skills at home and in the community. It does us no good to teach your child to use a long cane only to discover that the only time they use that long cane is on mobility lessons. Please, we are teaching your child, those of us who are teaching or instructing your child, service providers, we are doing that for a reason, because they need those skills to manage independently. And so I want to encourage you at home and when you're out and about in the community to encourage your child to use those disability-specific skills. And then finally on this slide, I encourage you to discourage over-reliance on helpers, including you. And when I think about helpers, I think about you, I think about those aides in the school system, I think about people out and about in the community who want to do things for your child that he or she may not need help with. Cutting their meat, for example, when you go to a restaurant, or taking their coat from them rather than waiting for them to hang their coat on a peg or in the closet. Discourage that kind of over-reliance on helpers, including you, because it sets the stage for them to understand that we expect them to be able to do for themselves, not always have other people doing for them. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Always ask your child to travel as independently as he or she is possible, whether they are using a cane, whether you have them plot the route using GPS, or whether they're using optical devices to read signs with a telescope, for example, rather than you reading those signs for them. Do not allow your child to be a passive passenger in a car. If you have a child with vision impairment in your car, encourage your child to be engaged in what's going on, to use their telescope to see whether the light is red or green, to use their telescope to read the signage. If they can't see to do those things, asking them to tell you where you are in space, either by recognizing your turns that you're making in the car or by following on their GPS. Make it an active participatory activity, going places in your car. Encourage your child to use their home and personal management skills. This means asking them to pick up after themselves. It means making their bed. It means helping with the laundry, all those things we talked about under chores. Those are home management skills for the most part. And then those personal management skills are the bathing, the toothbrushing, the combing their hair and brushing their hair, and all of those kinds of personal skills. I want to encourage you to help your kiddos set up and use banking facilities. They need to understand how to use money, how to be responsible with money, and the sooner they start these kinds of activities, the better. If you have your other children using debit cards, make sure that this child with vision impairment is also using a debit card, knows how to use it, and is responsible for its safety. Let your kids solve disability-related problems. Have them do the research to find out about public transportation or rideshare options. Have them make the phone call to see whether or not a store offers personal shoppers or assistants when you are going with them to the grocery store or to a retail shop. Have your child do that kind of research, because they're going to have to do it as adults. Next slide, please. I'm trying to move quickly here because I know I'm going to run out of time. So my fourth point is to please provide realistic feedback for your children, because ultimately all people are judged against the norms of the society in which they live. Your child's experiences in special education will end at 21. And then for the rest of his or her life, all of the judgments will be based on the community in which they live, the society in which they live. Special education is a bubble where kids with special needs are often evaluated or judged simply against their own work or the work of other kids with disabilities, rather than the work of all kids. And I think, frankly, it's a mistake, because I think as children get older, particularly in special education, they need to move closer and closer and closer to the norm, not simply stay forever in this bubble of special education. So I remind you, the way to make that happen is to provide realistic feedback for your children. Next slide, please. Tell your child what you see as the parent that other people are doing, how they are performing, what you see in terms of the work that they are producing. If you see other students' work, if you see other students' grades, share those with your child. If you see that your child's assignments are different than the other children's, to talk to your child about the differences and to find out from your child and the teacher when they might be able to meet the expectations of the other children's work. Ask the educators with whom your child works to share example of your child's classmates' completed work. Obviously, you would ask them to de-identify those papers or projects, but I think one of the things that really handicaps the kids that we work with is that they can't look over the shoulder of the student beside them or look at the work that their friends get back and see how their work compares to their peers' work. Ask the educators to give you examples of the other students' work so that your child can see how well he or she is doing in comparison to the other students in the class. Give your child time when they are learning new skills to practice those skills and give them verbal feedback on their performance. Not just thank you, you're a good girl, but thank you for completing the task. You were able to fold all the towels and sheets, everything that was flat in this load of laundry, you folded, and I really do appreciate that. You did really well. Those are the specifics that your child needs to know. And I end this slide with the be specific in your praise and in your criticism. If you don't like something that the child has done, it's important to tell them what they need to do differently to make it right for the next time. Be specific, both in your praise and in your critique. Next slide, please. Help your child understand that other people see us differently than we see ourselves, and those differences are important to consider for self-growth. What this really means is that all of us, with and without disabilities, need to find out from other people how they see us, what they like about us and what they don't like about us, so that we can think about whether we need to change in any way to be the person that we want to be. This is particularly critical in the transition from school to work, because at work, you have to match up to the expectations of your coworkers and the boss. And those people are not necessarily going to see you in the same way that you see yourself. Kids need to learn how to be able to say what it is they want other people to know about them. That's where these disability statements come into play, where I explain to you that I don't see as well as you do, if you're my prospective boss, but that I have skills to help me compensate for those differences in our vision, that I use screen magnification, or I use a handheld magnifier when I need it, or if I need to read a lot of written material, I might listen to it rather than use my eyes. Those are the kinds of differences that I need to explain to an employer, and kids need to understand that from the very beginning. If they want other people to see them the way they really are, they have to learn how to say what it is about them that's different and how they compensate for that. And if they find out that other people see them differently than they want to be perceived, they've got to think about what they need to do in terms of their behavior differently for other people to see them the way they want to be perceived. And that's something I think you really can help us with as parents, because you are observing, you see how other people respond to your child. Let them know this person seemed curious, or this person seemed standoffish, or this person seemed very eager to get to know you, so that they can think about what they were doing at that particular moment and talk to you about that and follow up on it. And then finally, I mentioned to you here on this slide that particularly as you are thinking about the future, you want to work with your kids to set goals. Achievement goals and personality goals. Achievement goals in terms of what do they need to get accomplished this week, this month, this year to move them closer and closer to where they want to be when they grow up. And then chart and monitor their progress towards goal completion using tactile graphics or calendar systems. So if you know your child needs to improve in their reading, or you know that they need to get faster in performing, then make a chart and start charting out their progress, where they are, where you're trying to get to by the end of the week, the month, the year, and make it so that they can access that chart. I like to give rewards because I think that a lot of times children will work towards a reward or an incentive. So if I know that one of the kids I'm responsible for needs to accomplish a certain amount of homework or do a big project by the end of the semester, I might ask them to plot out when they need to have certain things accomplished, benchmarks over the course of the semester. We'll monitor that at the end of the semester. If they accomplish it, there's a reward. I encourage you to think along those lines, please. Next slide, please. And then finally, probably the most important thing I'm going to talk about today in terms of the transition process, all of those other elements are very, very important. Having those high expectations, encouraging social skills, building, refining, developing those compensatory skills or access skills, and giving realistic feedback throughout the lives of your child. Those are all critical skills. But this last skill, this promoting opportunities to work, is in my opinion, one of the most critical things that is going to happen in life, because it's work. Work is the great equalizer in our society. In Western society, work is the second thing people usually ask you. Hi, how are you? What do you do? Or this is my name, what's your name? What do you do? Work is critical for life success. But I remind you, there is no mandate to provide jobs for people. People have to compete for jobs. They have to put in applications, have interviews, they have to make it through the process. And so throughout the life of your child, you need to remember that work is the outcome goal that most of us are going to school to get to. Most of us are engaged in life so that we can get to that point where we can work, earn money, make contributions to society so that we fit in. Next slide, please. What I encourage you to do as parents is always, always to encourage volunteerism throughout your child's early years. No later than about 10 years of age, I encourage you to encourage them to help other people. It may be handing out prayer books at church. It may be going to a senior center and handing out magazines or sitting and visiting with older people. It can be anything that is important to you, your community, and the child ultimately, but they need to get out and do things for other people. Working at a food bank, anything. I don't care what it is. It's important that they engage in volunteer activities. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't even have to be every week, but perhaps once a month or once a semester. Kids need to get out there and do things for other people, not just take and take and take, which happens with a lot of kids with disabilities. People do things for them. They don't do things for other people. I want your child to be exceptional and the exception. Get involved in volunteer activities. If you can, if you are able, pay your children to do out of the ordinary chores at home and in the community. My mother paid me to iron. I had all kinds of chores and responsibilities that I was responsible for that I didn't get paid for. But if I would iron, particularly my dad's uniforms, he was in the military, I got paid for that. And I promise you, it made a lasting impression on me. I understand that to do something out of the ordinary is to capture some kind of a reward, thanks to my mom. Pay your kids to do out of the ordinary chores, weeding the garden, mowing the yard, getting the mail every day, or walking the dog every day, or feeding the dog every day. I don't care what it is. If it's something that's out of the expectation of ordinary in your household, if you can, pay them. If you can't literally pay them, give them some other kind of reward, where this week I'll take care of all of your other chores because you did all of these things out of the ordinary. Facilitate your child's early work efforts. Help them with their chores, like I mentioned earlier. Provide transportation to volunteer activities or to part-time jobs, and then fade and let your child do that independently. Next slide, please. Help identify prospective work environments. Consider where you and your family and friends work. Think about where you shop. Think about where you go for services in the community. Think about whether any of those environments would be good environments for your child with a disability to consider for work. And once you've identified those work environments, start probing to find out what kinds of jobs are there, what kinds of supports might be available for your child to be able to engage in work in that environment. Encourage your kids to work, particularly part-time work during school or full-time in summer. Think about things like being a camp counselor or helping out in a restaurant, the kinds of jobs that their peers are doing. Working in a grocery store, working in any kind of retail, nurseries, shops, doing the kinds of things that the other kids are doing. It doesn't have to be full-time. It probably can't be full-time. They need to go to school. I understand that. But part-time, weekends, or during the summer, it's important that your kids get involved in work no later than 16. That ought to be the drop dead date by which you have your kids doing some kind of community-based work. If they can't find paid work immediately, move them into some kind of scheduled, routine volunteer work activity. Next slide, please. Teach your children how to differentiate between avocational and vocational pursuits. Avocational things are things we do for fun because we want to do them, we like to do them, we have an internal motivation. I go to swim because I like to swim, not because someone makes me do it. And vocational pursuits, which are externally motivated. Yes, I love the work that I do, but I wouldn't do the amount of work that I do gratis. I need to be paid for my activities. So vocational involves external motivation, typically payment for services. Help your children explore jobs. To job shadow you on your job or others that you know on their jobs. Go to job fairs with them. Encourage them to do informational interviews with you, your co-workers, extended family members, neighborhood people, to read about jobs online or hard copy, and to connect with visually impaired adults and learn about career possibilities and realities from those visually impaired adults. Next slide, please. This last series of slides is just on resources. So next slide, please. I encourage you to look at some of the books that are out there. My book that I edited called Skills for Success, which goes through these same 5 areas that I covered with you today in much greater detail. The book called ECC Essentials, Teaching the Expanded Core Curriculum to Students with Visual Impairment, which is actually designed for teachers, but I think is just as important for parents. And a comparable kind of book that came out of APH, the American Printing House for the Blind, called Quick and Easy Lessons for the ECC. It's on your printed copy, not on this slide. And then the last book I mentioned here is Teaching Social Skills to Students with Visual Impairments, which can give you some very specific tips on teaching those important social skills. I've given you a few websites here that I think are particularly important. Wonder Baby, which for those of you with younger children is a 0 to 5, is a great resource. Project Aspiro, which is the World Blind Union's employment resources website. The links are all here for you. Family Connect, which is a great resource if you're not familiar with it, for families of children with visual impairment. And Career Connect, which is a website specifically for visually impaired North American people, mostly United States, some Canadian, but lots of good information about jobs that blind and visually impaired people are doing and the people who are doing them. If you haven't looked at the Michigan Independent Living Skills guides and checklists, I encourage you to do so. They will give you wonderful chronological tasks that your child can and should be performing as they mature. And then finally, the Washington State School for the Blind has some wonderful instructional videos that I think parents find very informative, showing blind and visually impaired people typically performing some of those home and personal management techniques, grooming techniques, some of the skills that are not intuitive necessarily for those of us who are sighted, being performed by people who are visually impaired. So I encourage you to take a look at those. Next slide, please. And finally, I want to encourage you to reference your copy of the career education resources list that I've provided today. It's a 3-pager. There are lots and lots and lots of resources on there, websites, books, articles, all kinds of information. And if you have any questions about any of that information, please remember that you are welcome to reach out to me. Last slide, please. I thank you very much for attending. If you have any questions or concerns, I encourage you to email me. That goes specifically for these resources that I've shared with you on the Word document file that you will have received, hopefully, in advance from Renee. But if not, just request it. And any questions you might have about today's discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wolffe. Really appreciate it. A lot of great information.
My pleasure. Renee, I see that Mindy has joined us. Would you like me to see if Mindy has any questions?
Sure.
Mindy?
Let me see if I can unmute. I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
I do.
Okay. Thank you very much for this information. The things that are difficult, I find difficult, are, I know I just need to go and check the resources, is just the major employment areas that seem to be opening up the best for students who are Braille dependent, who are academically on track. So I know that like the whole computer industry, anything in the programming field, is working on becoming accessible. But what other areas do you encourage where you see a lot of people getting employed, and especially in our areas of the country where we're not near major metropolitan centers?
Yeah, I think, Mindy, that particularly with young people who are academically able, cognitively able, like you're describing, that it's almost the sky's the limit. So the best and most appropriate thing to do, I think, is to really start looking at what the options are where your child wants to live ultimately and perform. I don't know if you have a son or a daughter, Mindy.
I'm actually a TVI.
Oh, you're a TVI. Okay.
Yes. And we're also in an area that has terrible public transportation. And so you have to make sure you earn enough for that long distance Uber. You know, it's
Sure.
So I'm kind of encouraging my kids, if they can, to look into areas with better centers of transportation, because we don't really have a functional bus system, even for our, there's no public transportation here. It's very sketchy.
Understand. Yeah, I see a lot of that here in Texas as well, particularly outside the big urban areas. Mm-hmm. So a couple of things that I would mention, Mindy. I would really work closely with my students in your particular case on figuring out what they have to offer and what they want to offer to an employer. And then to start them looking at who are the employers in your area and around the state that they might consider as best options. Mm-hmm. And then to do some investigation, particularly on websites like Project Aspiro and Career Connect, to see whether or not there are other blind and visually impaired people doing those kinds of jobs. Mm-hmm. And if so, to reach out to those folks or to at least investigate how they are doing those jobs. Because what I find is that a lot of young people just don't realize how many blind people are actually working in jobs that they are interested in. Okay. So to get them going along those lines is really, really important. And to start them understanding that they really need to be working all day, every day, right now. Either volunteer activities or getting involved in community groups where they can be active participants and apply their skills and have people who will then reference them, be references for them moving forward. Because that's the other thing. I mean, it's not a problem to be a Braille reader or Braille writer, but it is a problem for sighted people sometimes to understand how you would manage in a visual environment with just Braille. So they need to be thinking about how they're going to explain what they do and how they do things. And if they have people who will speak up for them, if they've been volunteering at a hospital, for example, or in a library, to be able to have that employer who was their volunteer supervisor speak to their abilities is a reinforcement to a prospective employer.
Okay.
So they absolutely need to get engaged. They need to be involved in activities, volunteering, and then part-time work, and if possible, doing things for their neighbors and in the community for pay if possible, but starting out probably as volunteers and then for pay once they've refined their skills. Once they figure out what it is they want to be when they grow up, then they need to really start investigating what it's going to take to do that job that they're interested in. and make sure that they are learning the skills they need in school to be able to do that job as an adult. And to build that into their IEPs, Mindy, that they are on those skills that are related to the jobs they want to do and where they want to live. And to start talking to kids and families about the fact that they may choose to relocate into a larger urban area where transportation will not be as big an issue. Because a lot of blind people, frankly, who are successful in life move away from these rural communities and into larger urban areas. If they are lockstep on staying in a rural community, they need to be thinking about how they are preparing right now as kids, and their families need to be thinking about it, for transportation alternatives. So if the parent would have bought them a car, they need to start saving up for this child in a transportation fund. The child may ultimately even need to buy a car that he or she maintains for other people to drive them to and fro. Because it's easier to get a driver if you've got a car. And if they are not going to buy a car, I know a lot of blind people who own cars, but if they're not going to buy a car, that they have a cache of money for paying for those long Uber rides or paying someone to chauffeur them to and from. They may need to look within the community for, are there organizations, say, of retired people who would like to earn a little bit of extra money by being a driver? They need to start being creative in terms of their thinking, in other words, about how they're going to get around, because M&D are not going to always be there to take them places. So I think, Mindy, those are some of the things that pop into my head right away. When you ask me about specific jobs, you know, there are some jobs that are presenting as possibilities more frequently than other jobs. One of the things that a lot of people are doing right now is customer service, where they are working in call centers for banks, for insurance companies, or working for the Social Security Department, for IRS. You know, those kind of jobs are accessible and open to people who are totally blind. For the IRS jobs, you pretty much have to go through Lions World Services out of Arkansas and get trained up and be willing to go anywhere that the IRS wants or needs. You don't get to call the shots.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Interested in working for a bank or an organization like UPS or FedEx or any of the dispatching kind of jobs that are out there these days, those jobs, they need to look into who's hiring in their area and figure out what kind of equipment they're using and what kind of adaptations need to be made, if there have been scripts written for that equipment or not. A lot of the big hotels have call centers where they take reservations. Airlines take reservations. You know, that kind of work is accessible for sure. But you've got to be prepared to work with probably a script writer that may be available through the AT department at a rehab center. Or you're going to need to pay someone to do that with you. Most of that equipment is designed for sighted people, not blind people, so there have to be scripts written to access the software.
Okay. All right, thank you.
A lot of folks go into law, and that's a good profession. You know, it's more talk than it is most anything else. But there's still a lot of reading. They have to be prepared for a lot of reading. They have to be prepared for, you know, analysis of massive quantities of data. A lot of young people move into the social services, teaching, counseling. They need to look at the specific jobs. They need to look what's available in their neighborhoods or in their communities and think about what they really want to do and are best able to do. There's lots and lots of jobs in retail days. They need to think about it. What can they do? What are they interested in doing? What are they willing to do? mean, I've had totally blind kids go to work in restaurants like McDonald's, local restaurants like pizza parlors. You know, kids can do things, but they have to be prepared to figure out what it is they're willing to do and able to do, and then match it up to employer.
Okay, thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Karen.
Of course. Renee, did you have any questions?
I'm now going to get on these websites. I know that.
Good.
We're actually having a job fair. We're calling it a job fair in March at MSB, March 28th. And the only thing that we're having trouble locating some people to be, I guess, vendors. They all keep referring us to doors, which is great. But you know, I would love for, and I'm going to do this after I finish this webinar. Contact our career department about, you know, where have our students worked part-time, because we do have a career department here at MSB, and our students, some of them, depending on, you know, what credits they're getting and their focus, do go part-time jobs while they're going to school here. And
Right.
I know that there's some local businesses that have definitely supported that. So I think that's kind of the route I'm going to go, just so, you know, families, you know, kind of think outside the box, you know, and it really does depend on the children, the students' interests, and just finding a way to make that happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the other thing I would encourage you to do, Renee, is to reach out to doors and ask them which employers they've worked with that they would recommend that you invite.
Yeah.
And then I would also look at graduates. Where are your graduates working? And invite some of those employers in as well.
Actually, MSB is one of those employers.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I wouldn't focus on MSB. I would focus outside of MSB and outside of doors, but I would ask specifically for referrals from both sources, your career people at MSB and the doors people, for employers that have hired graduates.
Okay.
All righty.
Good starting point. Thank you so much. And I really hope to work with you again at some point. I really enjoy it.
It would be fun, Renee. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too. Have a good holiday.
All right. You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.